Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea with NCEA, and I'm excited to bring to you this special presentation for NCEA Virtual on school law. We are delighted to have with us Sister Angie Shaughnessy as our presenter today. As you know, she's a well-known favorite speaker at NCEA conventions, so we're delighted to bring her to you virtually. Sister Angie, as we get started, would you please lead us in prayer?
I certainly will. And what I selected for today is from the coronavirus novena. I think that's what we're all thinking about. And I want to talk today about the things we need to know, but may be afraid to ask in this time. So as we ask all things, we turn to God in prayer. And so in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. God in heaven, have mercy on us and on the whole world. We come to you today with our fears and concerns. You know what's in our hearts. We love you, trust you. We need you. We ask you to be with us, stay with us. Help us through these times of uncertainty and sorrow. We know you are the divine physician, the healer of all. And so we ask that you bring your loving and healing presence to all those who are sick and suffering right now. Please comfort them. Please be with the grieving families of those who have passed away. Please have mercy on those who have died. May they be with you in heaven. Please stand at the side of all medical professionals who are putting themselves at risk while they work to bring healing to others. Lord, we are scared and we are sorrowful. Please heal us. Send us your peace and your overwhelming presence. Mary, undoer of knots, please pray for the knot of this virus to be undone for the greater glory of God. Jesus, we thirst for you. You chose to enter this world as a vulnerable baby. Be with the most vulnerable now. Help us to continue to return to you with our whole hearts through this ordeal. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, whatever it is where you are listening to me and watching this presentation. These are very troubled times for us. And so in talking with the NCEA folks, they suggested that I talk about things we need to know in the pandemic, but we may be afraid to ask. And so what I've done is to take the slides that I've used probably for 10 years and try to update them a little in terms of the issues that we see now. And if there's anything that you want to ask me afterwards, because we don't have the luxury of a discussion, you see that I have put my email there, and it's mshaugh1@lmu.edu. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you might have. I am spending some time talking with people, and I'm happy to do that during this time of transition. So what are the new issues? And how do we respond? What's going on now 2 months ago seems unreal to us. I remember thinking back the second week in March, oh, this is really too bad, et cetera, the coronavirus, but not really grasping what will happen. That for many of us, we may not have been out of our homes, hopefully, except to exercise, to go to the grocery store or the pharmacy, or to the doctors. And so many parents are dealing, as we know, not just with trying to keep their children on task, but they're also trying to work from home. Or we have parents who have lost their jobs and they have no idea how they are going to pay the tuition. And so what I'm hearing from a number of people, even from schools that seem to, if you're looking from the outside, have everything together financially, that people are having a tough time. Some people are withdrawing their children. Some people are saying, I don't know how I'm going to pay this, but I'm going to let my child finish the year. We never thought we'd be dealing with anything other than perhaps we'd have to change our graduation venue. Now we don't even know if we're going to have one. These are the kind of issues that that are coming up today. What about proms for high school people? Recently, my niece said to me, well, maybe we could just go someplace and have a prom in somebody's backyard when all this is over. But it's not over, and we don't know when it's going to be over. So those are the issues. And sometimes it may be a temptation to say, why are they worried about proms? And yet most of us can remember being 17, and that was a big issue. I have a nephew getting ready to graduate from the University of Louisville, but graduation has been canceled. I have a great niece ready to graduate from one of the local Catholic high schools in Louisville. And I have another great niece ready to graduate from one of the parish schools in Louisville. And she is also losing the opportunity to defend her title as the city track champ. She did not get that from me. These are all real things that our students are dealing with, as well as all the other issues that we're dealing with every day. And I do think, at least in this city where I live, in Louisville, Kentucky, the Catholic schools have been online for a couple of weeks now, and the public schools just went online today with their students. So I don't know how widespread that is, but that brings up other issues that I'll talk about later in terms of attendance and days. So I want to go back to the basics and talk about what kind of issues do we have right now. If you remember, I always like to say that law is based on justice, obviously, but there should also be compassion. And so why do we need to know this? Almost everybody watching this has probably been threatened with a lawsuit. And just some basic knowledge is helpful. Probably the majority of people who are watching this now may be administrators or have some administrative function in this school, and you're saying, well, I don't remember you covering coronavirus or pandemics. I didn't. The last pandemic that I remember people talking about, and I had a student write a dissertation on, was 1994, the AIDS epidemic that started about 1992. If you can remember that, it was a time of great concern. We were looking at putting students out of school. That was 30 years ago, almost. Today, we're looking at something where we're almost afraid to go outside or go into a store. So we need to say, what does this mean for us today? Here are some common and still real misconceptions. These are ones I've talked about before, but people won't sue this school. I'm getting the calls that tell me that people are still talking about suing the school. It's the principal's problem anyway. Well, what's happening for many of us is we're finding that it's the principal and the president that ends up with the parental emails. I hope you haven't given your home cell phone or your home phone number or your cell phone number out, but if you have, you're probably inundated with calls. People always seem to have a better way to do something than the way we're beginning to do it, but I think that, or way we're doing it now, I think that it's important to keep in mind that we are in an experimental stage. If somebody makes a suggestion and we can implement it and we think it's a good suggestion, then implement it. I think that's just common sense. What you don't know can hurt you. Yes, it can. We all know that. But that's something that people tend to say, and I still hear it. Why worry about the law? God takes care of us. This is a very scary time for all of us. And many of us are saying, how could this happen? Recently, some of my students former students who I had only a few years ago said to me in a chat room, why did God do this to us? Well, I think it's important that we say to the kids, to our students, God didn't do this to us. God let it happen, probably for a reason, but God is not responsible for it. Yet we, have to come up with a whole new way of delivering our services. So let's go back to the old true or false test, but I had to put maybe in it. Some of you have heard me talk in the last few years know that I put maybe in because things have changed in some ways in terms of what the courts are saying. So I want to look at this old pretest and then say a few things that offer a few thoughts that might be helpful. So remember this one. This is the one that I always started out with. I've started out with it for, well, more years than I'd like to remember. I started presenting in 1984. Students and teachers in Catholic schools have the same legal rights as those in public schools. And we know that the answer to this is false. Although there's still people out there trying to say that we should have the same legal rights. The biggest difference here is that we do not have constitutional rights in the Catholic school. The students don't have them, and the teachers don't have them. Other employees don't have them. Administrators don't have them. But we do have rights, and they come from contract law. I think that as this pans out, if it goes to the end of the academic year, which I know my neighboring state of Indiana has already said there's going to be no more classes the rest of the year. They're going to be using the time to try to sanitize everything, and they said it's not worth it to go back for 3 or 4 weeks. Amazingly, it's children and students who are saying we want to go back to school, but I believe, and this is nothing but a Shaughnessy surmise, so we're going to see more states saying we can't go back to school. The best thing to do is to continue this way. So nothing has changed in that regard, but our issues have changed. We don't have them in front of us every day. So how do we hold to the behavioral norms? And I'll talk in a minute about some things that have happened that are probably occurrences that if we thought about it, we would say, oh yes, I should have seen that one coming. Honestly, when I first heard it, and it was the first week that somebody had been online, I think it was about the 3rd day of instruction, they had a situation arise online. I will explain that when we get to it. Never legally permissible to leave students unattended. Well, we know the answer to that is false. There are times when we can leave students unattended. One is a legitimate emergency. The other is, I'm the instructor, I have to use the restroom. Those are the times when we can leave students unattended. So what does this mean in an online situation? Well, we need to be online when the students are online, obviously. It can be tempting to say, well, look at this picture and write something, and then we kind of go do something else. This is not acceptable because we're responsible for what's going on when those students are online. At least we're responsible for supervising it, and for as far as possible, catching things that may appear to be inappropriate. The vast majority of students that I know would love to be back in the classroom. I had to laugh at, I have a niece with 7 children, and she said that they are calling her home Kelty Academy, and their slogan is, we would much rather be in this school building. So a lot depends on your parents. Are they providing supervision or are they not? Can they provide supervision? If they are essential service providers, they may not even be able to be there. We do have a responsibility though, and it's easy to lose sight of it because they're not right in front of us. What is the responsibility of parents and of teachers and of administrators? Well, parents are supposed to be sure that the students are online. Now that's easier said than done if you're not there. If you have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, or 4th, 5th, and whatever age child, then if you can't be there, parents can't be there, they have to ensure that the child they leave in charge is making sure the kids are online. What if you don't have enough devices? That's part of why Jefferson County, that's where I live, couldn't start, because they had students without the devices. They had them in school, but they didn't have them at home. So they made arrangements for devices to be delivered or picked up. Teachers, as I said, are supposed to provide the instruction and have an awareness of what's going on online. You know, use your ability to see all your students. And administrators are still supposed to supervise. So you need, if you're an administrator, you need to be sure that you're popping in and out of those classrooms, those online classrooms, and you need to be sure that your vice principal is, your assistant principal, if you have one, your director of instruction, your department heads, etc. This can be time consuming, but if you were at school, you would probably be walking the halls, checking in classrooms, going into the cafeteria, going to the playground. It's a different way of presence, but we're still expected to be present. Number 3, lawsuits alleging educational malpractice are increasing. This one I'm going to say right now is a maybe, because we had hit a real downturn in these kinds of lawsuits because they're very difficult to prove, and the majority of them, believe it or not, are either you didn't teach me to read, or I got a grade I didn't like in professional school, medical school, law school. So I'd say it's maybe right now. Got to watch it. Can teachers face legal action for what they do or don't teach online? I believe the answer to that is yes, because we can face legal action for what we do or don't teach in the classroom. I know it is difficult as someone who has taught online, and I definitely am in the dinosaur category in terms of technology. It brings its own set of issues when you teach online. And for many of our people who are teaching online now, they've never done it before. I'm sure you still have people who, when you tell them to keep up their page on the school website, it says, welcome to Miss Jones's first grade classroom, and we're in April now. So we need to be sure that our teachers know how to teach online. They don't have to be the world's greatest experts, but they can at least deliver a lesson, and they can involve the students. And they know how to put the students in chat rooms, break rooms. Are administrators responsible for what teachers do online? Absolutely. Absolutely. So they must drop in and out of the online classrooms. How do we supervise it? I don't know any other way than dropping in and out, perhaps doing it the same way that you have done supervision in the past, which is, for many of us, do you have a lesson plan? May I see it? Watching the entire lesson, which some of us are going to have to do if we have a requirement of 2 supervisory sessions. So it's important that we can show that we did supervise our teachers and how we did it. Now, you might find it strange that I've got this one up here. Obviously, we're not going to be taking kids on buses anywhere for a while. But if parents have signed a field trip permission slip, teachers cannot be held liable for any injury to students. We know that's false. Well, we're not going on any physical field trips. But are we going on virtual field trips? We may very well be doing that. Teachers may very well be doing that. I have no problem with that, except that we have to be sure that these are places that we would be happy for our students to go under different circumstances, even if it's across the world, and that the content is appropriate. Some principals have told me that they have said to their teachers, if you're going to do a virtual field trip, I need to know what it is. So, and what your goals are in the field trip. Should they still be approved? I think they should. This is what I plan to do. I sent an email to my principal. We are going to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and we're going to be looking at the certain period of art in that. We may be going to look at Impressionism, let's say, so that the principal knows what's going on, because you don't want an email from a parent saying, what on earth is that teacher doing? Catholic schools do not have to accept students with special needs, and we know that's true, but we can't, just for the record, and especially if you're a first time listening to Sister Angie, we don't have to accept students with special needs, but we can't discriminate against an otherwise qualified student if he or she can meet the program requirements with reasonable accommodation. So since most of us, if not all of us, have students with some kind of special needs, we now face making accommodations to the agreed upon accommodations because we're not in a classroom, a physical classroom. How can we do this well and not compromise the education of other students? This is a question I think we each have to ask ourselves, and maybe principals in a given diocese can get together. I know a lot of superintendents are going online with their principals and saying, how can we do this? Some of us are already 2, 3, 4 weeks into this online thing, or this online medium. However, I know that many of us also had a week of spring break in there. So it's not too late to begin to think about the students with special needs, and the parents may have already been in touch with you. I believe we need to go back to whatever our plan is. If you have an instructional service plan, not an IEP, because we really don't want to take them in Catholic schools, because it can appear that we're agreeing to be bound by the same rules as the public schools. Sometimes we virtually take everything that's on it, but we need to call it something else. The question, and I can't answer it for you, but how can we make those accommodations to the accommodations and not compromise the education of other students? That's the question. What's reasonable? It's not reasonable that the teacher provide one-on-one instruction to the student with special needs. It's also not reasonable that the teacher stop for 5 minutes to do this. It's going to take a partnership between the parent and the teacher and the principal, as it always should, but it's going to be more difficult under these circumstances. Teachers do not need to provide any medical assistance to students. You might say, why on earth does she have that on there? That's false. We do have to provide, in the classroom anyway, we have to provide something reasonable. I mean, if a student is choking, we should try the Heimlich maneuver or whatever thing we know in first aid. But now we're online. And the questions I'm getting now is, well, what about the mental health of our students? I think the same principles apply. So whatever our legal responsibilities would be if we became concerned about the mental health of a student in our classroom, then we need to do physical classroom. We need to follow the same protocols if we become concerned about the mental health of students who are in our online classrooms. This can be a real challenge. I was talking with Dr. Michael Huggins, who many of you know I have written books with, and who is a co-presenter, always at the law symposium. And he is a first responder as well as a college professor as a nurse practitioner. And he said that he had just done a webinar kind of thing on psychological first aid. I said, what is psychological first aid? And he said, well, it's when something really bad has happened, like a catastrophe, and people aren't physically hurt, but they are traumatized. So he said, for example, once this is over, heavily hit areas may be looking at people who have really tremendous needs that aren't being met from a mental health standpoint. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Now, obviously, most of us are not mental health professionals, and nor are school counselors, but we need to be able to contact parents. We need to notify the principal and say, here's a list of places you can go or people you can call. The vast majority of counselors are now doing either Zoom counseling sessions or telephone sessions or some kind of virtual session with their clients. Number 7, teachers can be held liable for one student's harassment of another. This was a little bit surprising to me when it first came up. As I said, it came up with a principal of a high school about the second day of online instruction. And what happened was that a student screenshot another student in a rather unflattering position and then posted it on social media with some more unflattering information. That's online bullying, and it's still a reality. So what the principal did was to contact the parent, say it was unacceptable, say what the consequences were for that student and that he had to take it down. This is something that we need to be aware of, that social media is out there. It does not mean we have to be the social media police, but a parent had contacted the principal and said, my daughter's picture in class is online, so if you haven't already said to your students, you can't record any of this, can't take pictures of any of this. This is without written permission from an administrator. And why would a student do that? Well, we all know that goes on. I'm not a psychologist. Some of it I think is simply boredom. Some of it is simply kids being kids, but it's not okay. And that's what we need to tell our students. It is not okay. And as a principal, your principals, I would consider, if you're in a parish school, asking the pastor to go online once or twice, say a few things to the students. Ultimately, he is the ultimate authority figure. I hope that if you're a principal in a parish school or in a conglomerate school, that's not the right word, but a combined school, merged schools, that you do have a pastor you can call on. It's hard for us, I know it's really hard without the mass, without the opportunity to bring the kids together, although we could have a virtual mass. And as we move into Holy Week, we are in Holy Week, maybe we might want to think about that. Simply to put the religious nature of the school forward. So we need this policy of no screenshots, recordings of online classes or individuals participating in the classes. Really old one from my original one, students should be told what it is they have done wrong and allowed to present an explanation before punishment or discipline is imposed. How do you discipline online classes? Well, pretty much the same way you discipline physical classes. You can send a message, Johnny, I want to see you online after we get off, after the class ends, and you deliver a reprimand or however you would normally handle it. If you need to impose something greater, then I'm sure you can talk to the principal and come up with something, a written assignment, etc. As far as I know, no one's told me about online detention. However, that could possibly be something people could consider. How do you discipline classes while online? Well, I think I just said it. You send a note stop that behavior, whatever it is, and I'll see you when everybody else leaves. Now, we talked for many years about negligence, and negligence has to have 4 elements, but we need to keep this in mind right now because it's the most often litigated. So just to remind you, in order to have a finding of negligence, we have to have a duty in this situation. If we don't have a duty, then we can't be negligent. But we do have a duty when we're teaching online. And we have a duty for what students do while they're online, or if they use information they got while they were online, like taking pictures and whatnot, or recording, and then doing something with it. We have a duty to do something about it. But in order for us to be guilty of negligence, we would have to have violated the duty. I know that this student is doing this, is harassing this girl, it's online all the time, but I just don't know what to do about it. Well, then you violated your duty. It has to be some sort of injury. So mom or dad says, my daughter can't sleep, she's having nightmares, et cetera, et cetera. And there has to be a relationship between the violation of duty and the injury. Proximate cause means but for what I did or didn't do, there would have been no injury. Now, students have a right to put whatever they want on social media, going back to number 7, which was teachers can be held liable for one student's harassment of another. We need to understand again that students don't have a right to do this. This gives them sort of a whole new way to harass people. It's always been there, but it's not probably been at the top of most of our list unless something happens. And I believe that the same rules apply if the class is online as they do if they're not online. We are not the social media police. You do not have to spend your time looking for what your students have posted online. But if something is brought to your attention, then you need to do something about it. Some issues that have come up now are that I want to talk about for a few minutes. Academics, the loss of instructional days. We're all losing or going to lose instructional days. Most state legislatures are saying, well, you don't have to make up so many days. I know in Kentucky it's 20. In other states, it can be different. Some, at least I believe one state has said you don't have to make up any of them. These are concerning to many of us, and they should be. Not that I think we have to necessarily say, okay, we missed 2 school days, we've got to make them up. I'm not saying that. But when I remember years and years ago, many years ago, I was a principal in Boston, and it was the year of the blizzard. And they decided basically not to make up a lot of days. And I remember that we lost close to 40 days of instruction. That's a lot of instructional time. So I don't have the answer because every state is going to have a different situation. 2025, I'm not saying we can do without it, but certainly better than 40 or 50, or we're not going to worry about the rest of the year. Some schools have gone to the pass-fail option. I know the colleges and universities have done this. At the college and university level, one of the pros is I don't have to have a nervous breakdown, so to speak, over whether I'm going to pass this class. The con is, at the college level, and I'm going to bring it down, is it can affect my GPA. Maybe I would have had an A, but I chose the pass-fail option. If you are going on to advanced study, it can affect your ability to get the master's degree and not have to retake the class because some classes can't be taken pass-fail if you go on. Now, what about those of us who are grade schools and high schools? You're probably thinking, well, that's not my problem, what I just described. And no, it isn't. But at the high school level, What do the colleges say about pass-fail? Your counselor should be able to get some information. It may affect the GPA. It will affect the GPA. Because if I would have gotten an A and I don't have that A to factor in, my GPA is going to be lower. On the other hand, if I would have gotten a D, my GPA might be higher. So we're not going to have an accurate, kind of accurate picture we usually have, because we're not used to using pass-fail at the elementary and secondary level, but it's out there. As I said, there are pros and cons. One of the biggest cons I see is that people think nobody's going to fail. And so we have to present this appropriately to people and say, if you choose this, here's the pro and here's the con. Finances, huge issue, huge issue. And I wish I could wave a magic wand and tell you, here's how you're going to fix this. Do parents have a right to withhold full or partial tuition payments? Well, they've signed a contract saying that they will make payments. Or they've signed a handbook that says this is what it is. Or maybe you're in a stewardship parish and the expectation is in some stewardship parishes that they will give a certain amount of money, or they agree this is my stewardship. But if they're not working, they're not going to be able to pay, or at least they're not going to be able to pay what they've agreed to pay. So we're caught on the horns of a dilemma. If we say you have to pay, they leave. If we say you don't have to pay, are we creating an atmosphere where they feel this year was a freebie? Or do we simply say these are times we never expected? We'll work with you. I was thinking this morning that maybe one of the things we could do is say, I need you to pay something every week. And if all they can pay is $5 a week, then take the $5 a week, unless they're not going to eat because of that. But the $5 says, I recognize I have an obligation, which is important. And because some older case laws suggest if you didn't ask for the tuition, if you didn't let people know it was out there, I think it's important to say, we'll work with you. We're asking you to please send in something. $5 a week, $20 a month, what can you send in? We can't really enforce these payments, but we may be able to get something. We have to pay our bills too. We have to pay our faculty. My pastor has been online to the parish a couple of times, very appropriately saying, you know, I need you to do what you can because we still have to pay the staff, we still have to pay the teachers, we have ongoing expenses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're in the middle of a capital campaign. So, you know, these sorts of things happen and you don't really know, we don't know why, but we have to do the best we can. If we allow students to return to our regular school with large balances, are there ways we can ensure that we will be paid? Well, there's no way I know of that ensures that you're going to be paid except to withhold the transcript. And some states say you can't withhold a transcript. So what you do then is to say you can't take your final exams or turn in your last project and all your grades are incomplete, so I can give the transcript with incompletes on it. This is very difficult in these trying times, and you should be able to make exceptions. If both parents have lost their job, they're not going to be able to pay you. Maybe they can't even pay you $5. Then I would say, can you pay $1 a week? So keep in their minds that we need to pay our bills too. So I'd kind of like to sum up here with 10 points, or maybe it's 9, points. It's really 10, but I didn't label the last one. Points to keep in mind now and post-pandemic. Number one, the principles of civil law remain the same. We are bound by statutes, regulations, and executive orders. Now, I've never talked about executive orders, but we're hearing a lot about this. The governor says you must shelter in your home. And there are always people that don't do it. And well, I haven't heard of a Catholic church that's doing this yet, although some Catholic churches are open and are telling people to stay 6 feet apart. My own parish is closed, although we have telecast services. The people, at least in my state, that seem to be most violating executive orders or religious people who are having the services. And no matter how tempting it may be to have the first communicants get together and stay 6 feet apart, we should not do this. The 6 feet apart, as you know, is for necessary travel. Contract law is still the main source of the law affecting Catholic schools. This might be a good time to go look at your handbook. Pull out the NCEA book that I've written. I know we're on the second revision, so it's the third version of the handbook book. And think about some of the things that you maybe haven't had time to think about before. Do I have everything in there I want? Do I have them signing a statement that they agree to be bound by the handbook? And what in this handbook can I hold people to now? Our instructional issues are largely the same as those of public schools, number 3. They are, but we have the religious issue. And so we say we are Catholic schools. This means we have to have religion taught, and I'm sure you're doing it. The principal needs to be sure that that's primary. This is a very good time to insist everybody starts class with prayer. We need prayer. We have been brought to our knees by this pandemic. I've probably lived longer than most of you listening to me, and I can tell you I've never seen anything like this. I can remember times, I was a very young elementary school student when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. And then we can go through all the other things that have happened and how we felt unsafe after 9/11. This is extremely scary. We will get through it, but it's going to take all of our courage, and for our principals, it's going to take all of our leadership skills. And we need to remember that one of those skills is applying legal principles. Remember, number 4, that the primary legal duties of teachers are to provide supervision of students and instruction regardless of the medium of instruction. So I have to provide instruction, and I also, just the same way as I have to keep order in my classroom, physically in the school, I need to keep order in my classroom when it is online. This can be tough, but I have to do it. Primary legal duties of administrators are to make, develop, and communicate rules and policies and supervise teachers. I've been singing this legal song since 1984. So, supervising teachers. Are you popping in and out of the classes? Are you staying there and writing up a supervisory visit at least one time? Are you checking your handbooks, your faculty handbook, making sure you're doing whatever it says in there? This is not the time for us to kind of let our guard down when it comes to some of these things, because one of the two primary duties of teachers, of principals, is to supervise teachers. I've talked about these, but I just am trying to summarize here. 6, students with special needs still must have those needs met. If we've got an accommodation, then as I said, we may have to accommodate the accommodation. I can't tell you how to do that, but as I said, you can feel free to email me if you have a question about any of this. Number 7, the mental health of our students must still be our concern. Administrators and counselors must help teachers be aware. Hopefully, your local county, city, public health department, or even the state Department of Education is sending out things to help you with the kids, with the students, and how they can keep their mental health at an optimal level. Most of us have our days of feeling kind of down. And we can maybe send a newsletter out to parents with some suggestions. Get them outside every day. And be sure they have enough exercise. Talk to your kids. Years ago, I used to quote a research study that said, really said, 75% of students under the age of 18 have less than 10 minutes a day alone talking to a responsible adult. And the rest of it was, it's usually a teacher, or it's often a teacher. That is not to put down parents, is the reality in which we find ourselves. So teachers, be aware of your students. Now, what if they want to talk with you outside of class? I'm sure there's a medium that's been set up for you to do it, a chat room or something. Just remember the same safeguards that we talk about in our relationships with students when we're physically present to them apply. And we need to take care of our own mental health. Your students are active on social media, probably more active today than ever. Bullying remains a reality on and off screen. Pay attention. Pay attention. You remember, or some of you will remember, that we used to say that teachers had eyes in the back of their head. And now I think we need ears, and then we need the sight. When we see students doing something, or we hear about students doing something, we need to pay the same attention we would pay if they were in the classroom. Finances will continue to be a problem. What's fair? What's reasonable in terms of keeping students enrolled whose parents cannot pay for the foreseeable future? I remember something that Father Andrew Greeley said probably 25, 30 years ago. He said, an empty seat in your classroom is an opportunity lost forever to preach the gospel and have that gospel carried out beyond the desk in the classroom. I paraphrased that a bit. I took that to heart as a high school administrator. We did not have empty seats. Not everybody paid. You may not feel you're in a position to do this. This may be a pastor's decision, but we are going to have a problem here. And we need to be thinking about it now. What am I going to do when somebody comes and says they can't pay? And it's probably going to be more somebody's than you're used to. So my last point is to remember, we need to ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? That's our guiding question in the past, now, and in the future. If Jesus were here, which he is, what would he do if he were running this school? Every day we need to ask ourselves that. And we need to ask ourselves, what can I do as a principal in a Catholic school, or a teacher, or some other administrator, or the pastor? What should I do? What should I do? What would I advise another to do? Or I say, what would I advise my best friend to do? Very important question. What would Jesus do? Because I think once we pray and we have a sense of what Jesus is leading us to do, we're not going to go wrong. Jesus knows that we are vulnerable. In his holiest of weeks, when Jesus walked the road to Calvary, saw Peter deny him 3 times, saw the apostles run away except for John. Dripped blood as he went to his execution. That's the man, the God that we follow. We must pray. You may be thinking, okay, Sister Angie, you're a sister, we know that. But is that legal? Well, we say we're Catholic. We put signs up about this is a Catholic school. Jesus is the primary teacher. It's who we say we are. So I believe that we do need to pray in these troubled times. Yes, we need to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, the legal issues. But we also need to remember that we must render unto God the things that are God's. It's been a real pleasure being with you on this recording, and I pray for you every day, and I trust that God will lead us through this, and we will all be better people and more committed and stronger members of our communities. God bless you all. Thank you.
And thank you, Sister Angie, for putting this together for our members so quickly. We appreciate you sharing your time and expertise.
Thank you.